Here, I have your termination notice. What? For me? I was met with a sudden notice of termination as I arrived at work as usual. If I lose my job, I won't be able to survive. When I returned to my shabby apartment in utter despair, a beautiful woman greeted me with, "Welcome home, you're late today." She used to be homeless. Even in this rundown apartment, we finally had a roof over our heads. If this continues, I might end up back on the streets with her. This is the story of a man on the edge, trying to protect the woman he loves. My name is Brian. I'm 25 years old and have been with my current company for 4 years. My family wasn't wealthy and I had a younger brother and sister. My parents never said it, but with our financial situation, it was difficult to send 3 kids to college. To make matters worse, the university I wanted to attend was private. As the eldest son, the only way for me to attend my desired university was to get a scholarship. I had been planning my future early and convinced my parents, who said they'd manage somehow, that I would handle things myself. I graduated from university and got a job right away. However, despite landing a job in my desired field, the pay was low and I was constantly paying off student loans, living a poorer life than I did as a student. I lived in a 50-year-old dilapidated apartment, constantly turned down invitations to drink with colleagues, and led a joyless life. Recently, Mr. Thompson, the company president who was kind to newcomers, passed away. Even though the pay was low, the company held together thanks to Mr. Thompson's personality. But since his son became the new president, our wages were cut under the guise of cost-cutting and working conditions worsened. That day, as soon as it was time to leave, everyone quickly started packing up. There was likely a drinking party afterwards. I had always declined, so they had stopped inviting me. "Brian, you can work overtime if you want." I bet you weren't invited to today's drinking party either. The work I was doing couldn't progress without my boss's approval. If my boss went to party, there was no point in staying, so I started packing up when the new president, Mr. Thompson Jr., sneered at me. This alone was unbecoming of a president, but he often targeted me, perhaps because we were the same age. "Sorry, I need approval from Luke, so I'll finish this tomorrow and leave for today." Despite his grandstanding, overtime pay wasn't even provided. I simply nodded at the new president, who seemed unsatisfied, and left the office. I didn't feel like heading straight back to my shabby apartment, so I killed some time at a nearby park. Payday was the day after tomorrow. Sitting on a park bench, I checked my wallet and found only $1.13. Even if I had been invited, I couldn't have joined the party, but it still bothered me. I remembered that the discount store down the street had a sale on non-alcoholic beer. In a fit of frustration, I decided to use my last $1.13 to have a solo drinking session. Just as I was about to stand up from the bench, a low growling sound echoed, and the person sitting a seat away from me collapsed onto my lap. "Hey, wait a minute." I hadn't noticed in my wallet-checking days, but the person next to me was a woman. Unable to react to the sudden situation, I froze, and the woman's head ended up resting on my lap. It was the first time a woman had rested her head on my lap. Frozen in place, I peered at her face. Oh wow. I thought I was dreaming. Though she was dirty, she was a stunning beauty, slightly older than me, unlike anyone I'd ever seen. The fact that I was giving a lap pillow to such a beautiful woman made my heart race. Are you okay?" I hesitated to touch her but ended up shaking her shoulder. "I'm so hungry. I can't go on," she answered in a small voice. She seemed to be all right. "Just wait here for a moment." I gently laid her head off my lap, placed my down jacket as a pillow, and hurried to the convenience store in front of me. With my last $1.13, I bought a piece of bread. I then rushed back to the park. She was still collapsed on the bench. She might be ignored because she's homeless, but she was way too defenseless. Even though we just met, I couldn't help but worry about her. "Here, take this." I held the bread close to her face so she could see it. "Food." She immediately sat up. Her pure reaction was so endearing that I couldn't help but laugh. "Ah. I'm glad you're feeling better." After a moment of freezing at my laughter, she seemed to understand the situation, and her face turned bright red. "I'm sorry for everything." Before she could finish, her stomach growled again. "Oh no." She stood up abruptly, looking like she was about to run away. "Why don't you eat this and calm down first?" At my suggestion, she quietly sat back down on the bench. She took the bread, saying thank you. I'll gladly accept, and started eating it with relish. Seeing a beautiful woman happily eating bread made my bad day at work seem unimportant. It was incredibly soothing. Spending my last money on this was a much more meaningful use than buying non-alcoholic beer for a solo drinking session. Helping someone in need felt like a win-win. After finishing the bread, she smiled and said, "Thank you for the meal." Despite looking older, her smile made her appear a bit younger. No, I wish I could have offered something better, but I'm broke too." "Really? And yet you gave me your precious bread." She looked surprised and started to panic. "Don't worry about it. Payday is the day after tomorrow, so I just need to get through tomorrow. I'm a company employee. But I live paycheck to paycheck." "Please don't say that. It's impressive that you have a job and are working hard. I'm sorry for being presumptuous. And I haven't even introduced myself. I'm Mia." With that, Mia gave me a different kind of smile, one that seemed more mature. "Oh, I'm Brian. And you didn't bother me at all. Before meeting you, I was about to spend my last money on non-alcoholic beer to drown my sorrows." When I joked, Mia laughed naturally too. We continued to sit on the bench, chatting about various things and really hitting it off. Though it was just small talk, it was the most fun and fulfilling time I had in a long time. The sun has set without us realizing it. I don't have a watch, so I lost track of time. I'm sorry for talking so much. Especially since you have work tomorrow. She tried to end our pleasant time together. Feeling a sudden pang of loneliness, I couldn't help but invite her. "If you don't mind, would you like to come to my place? It's a shabby apartment, but it's better than here because it has a roof." Even I thought it was a bold proposal. Inviting a woman to my place. But I didn't want to part ways with her, so I was desperate. That would be an imposition, wouldn't it? She seemed only worried about being a burden, and not about the possibility of my having ulterior motives or the discomfort of going to a man's place. Maybe she lacked such wariness because she was homeless? I was still worried about her. "I want to talk to you more, Mia. It's been a long time since I've had such a great time. Besides, as I said before, my place is a shabby apartment. Sometimes the roof leaks, but it's still better than being out in the rain." "Yes, you're right. Then, if you don't mind, I'll take you up on your offer." Mia answered hesitantly, so before she could change her mind, I took her back with me. From that day on, Mia and I started living together. Although it wasn't cohabitation in the romantic sense, living under the same roof with a woman made me nervous. Changing clothes, taking a bath, having someone else around made me a bit conscious of my actions. However, Mia naturally adjusted to my lifestyle to avoid disrupting it. Moreover, she took care of all the housework, saying I can't just freeload. When I came home, a clean apartment and a delicious meal awaited me. More than anything, I was happy to have someone greet me with "welcome home." The laundry I used to do after work was done when I returned, and my dress shirts were always neatly ironed. Seeing this made my female colleagues suspect that I had a girlfriend or was living with someone. I denied their words, but deep down I felt a sense of joy. Mia understood my financial situation well and helped me save money. She would visit several supermarkets to find special deals and even grow vegetables and planters. She took care of many things without spending money, putting in a lot of effort. Once I told her, "You don't have to go to such trouble. Please buy what you need within our budget." But Mia laughed and said, "I have plenty of time. If you can buy time with money, the reverse is also true." Coming home to Mia made me finish work faster. Just knowing she was there was enough motivation to complete my tasks quickly. Not having to do housework and Mia's excellent management of our finances meant I no longer constantly worried about money, allowing me to focus more on my job. As a result, my efficiency improved and I received more praise from my boss. Although the new president, Mr. Thompson, continued to dislike me and occasionally harass me, I became more capable of handling it. "Recently, I hear you've been improving your performance." I turned around to see Mr. Thompson standing there with a malicious grin. That day, an email detailing Mr. Thompson's alleged misappropriation of company funds was sent to all employees. It also mentioned that the new female executive recruited from another company was actually his girlfriend. The source of the email couldn't be traced, and it was quickly dismissed as a baseless prank, but rumors spread among the employees. Because of this, Mr. Thompson was in an exceptionally foul mood today. I bet I'll be his target again today. I thought immediately. The best way to get through this was to obey quietly and wait for him to be satisfied and leave me alone. Good evening. I need you to work overtime, given your recent performance. Now. I checked the clock, it was just past quitting time. Got a problem with that? Don't get cocky just because your performance has slightly improved. You're still a low-level employee because you can't do your job. He spoke as if implying he earned his position as president through merit. In reality, he only inherited the business after his father, Mr. Thompson, passed away. I swallowed my thoughts and asked, "What do you need me to do?" He led me to a musty archive and ordered me to compile data from old documents dating back 40 years. These documents, created before the widespread use of computers, were all typed or handwritten with no backup data. The contents weren't urgently needed, and if it truly were urgent, it would have been faster for everyone to pitch in. Clearly, this was just Mr. Thompson's harassment. When is the deadline? By noon tomorrow. Should be an easy task for you, right? Understood. Defying him would only complicate matters. I responded obediently and started the task immediately. Compiling this amount of data would take until the last train, even if everything went smoothly. Well, I'll leave it to you. With that, Mr. Thompson took other employees and went out drinking again. He probably thinks he can offset his bad reputation by taking employees out drinking. No one would find it strange if I didn't join the gatherings, as I never do. No one would realize that I was assigned such late-night work here. I took a deep breath and began selecting the necessary data from the vast amount of documents and entering it into the computer. The overtime work ended sooner than expected. Looking at the clock, I saw it was 10 p.m. I thought it would take until the last train, so I was glad to be going home early. Mia didn't have a phone, and of course my shabby apartment didn't have a phone either. There was no way to contact her in such situations. I'm home. Welcome back. When I got home, Mia greeted me with relief. It's comforting to have someone welcome me when I return home exhausted. Mia had prepared dinner and waited for me without eating. When I'm late, please eat and go to bed. I want to wait for you. Is that wrong? I couldn't argue with that. I don't seem to be well liked by my president. Occasionally he assigns me overtime like this. It depends on his mood, so it's irregular. This might happen again. Mia's eyes widened. That's harassment. Someone in his position shouldn't be so awful. Her expression showed disbelief. I couldn't help but vent about Mr. Thompson. Exactly. He's losing the trust of the employees and is getting desperate. Since he took over, I've overheard the executives saying the company's sales are plummeting. They say the company is in danger. If it goes under, I'll be out on the streets. I said it jokingly, but Mia seemed genuinely worried. No way. You're working so hard, Brian. It felt good to be recognized for my efforts by someone, especially her. I just want to keep things as they are. How long will this life last? I have no money, but I'm happy living with a wonderful woman. I want this life to continue for as long as possible. I don't want to let go of my current environment. But someday she will leave. Brian. She called out to me, worried about my silence. This life feels like an old tale. What are you talking about all of a sudden? Though puzzled, Mia listened without denying. Like when someone helps and the grateful person stays to help out in return. Like the grateful crane? Unfortunately, I'm human, so I can't weave fabrics. In those stories, the woman always leaves at the end. Why are you saying this now? This life with her will eventually come to an end. But if that were the case, I would be playing the role of your wife, Brian. Ha. I'm joking. I'm a whole decade older than you. Now, let's have dinner before it gets cold. Mia deflected my question and set the table with our meal. The next morning, I was called to the executive room as soon as I arrived at work. In the presence of Executive Vice President, Thomas, Senior Managing Director, David, and Head of Human Resources, James. I was handed an envelope with the words, "We want to give you this." Feeling intimidated by the serious atmosphere, I took the envelope back to my desk. Inside the envelope was a document labeled, "Notice of Termination." What is this? To my shock, it was a termination notice. If I lose my job now, I won't be able to survive. I won't be able to live with Mia anymore either. This must be Mr. Thompson's doing. It's unreasonable, but I can't just accept being fired without cause. I headed straight to the president's office. What's the reason? At my sudden question, Mr. Thompson feigned ignorance, saying, "What are you talking about?" The reason for my termination. Termination? Yes, why am I being fired? Mr. Thompson looked genuinely confused. Could he really not know? If that's the case, who did this? I didn't issue this. Maybe one of the executives decided you were an unnecessary employee. No way. You have the paperwork, right? Unfortunately, you're fired. Mr. Thompson said this with a smirk, and I barely restrained myself from grabbing him. What does this man think about people's lives? I stormed out of the office. A colleague tried to stop me, but I ignored them. I found myself heading to the park where I had met Mia. Sitting on the bench where it all began, I let out a sigh. What am I going to do now that I've lost my job? In these tough times, finding a new job quickly is unlikely, and even if I do, I wouldn't get paid for at least 2 months. How will I survive in the meantime? I wouldn't be able to keep up with my student loan payments. Mia, who finally has a roof over her head, would be homeless again. Lost in thought, my phone rang several times. The calls were from the company. I turned off my phone. Desperate to take action, I went to the employment office, grasping at straws. I spent hours there, diligently looking at job listings until closing time. What am I going to tell Mia? That thought consumed me as I returned to my shabby apartment. I'm home. Welcome back, you're late. As usual, Mia greeted me. Is something wrong? She immediately sensed something was off and asked me with concern in her voice. I was fired today. What? I received a termination notice. Mia seemed to ponder this and then muttered, "That's strange." What could be strange about it? Her muttering stuck with me. Let's sit down and have dinner. I followed her lead and sat down. Even during dinner, I couldn't help but sigh, unable to enjoy our usual conversation. My last name is Thompson. At first, I didn't understand what she meant by that sudden statement. What was significant about the name Thompson? It's not a common name, but it's not particularly rare either. The company president's name is also Robert Thompson. When I looked at Mia, thinking no way, she gave a small nod. Robert Thompson is my younger brother. What? You two don't look alike at all. That's what surprises you. Mia's remark made us both laugh. Why would Mr. Thompson's sister be homeless? Though the current president is the way he is, their father, the former president, was a kind and well-loved man. Sorry for keeping this a secret. I wanted to wait until things were more settled before telling you. With that, Mia began to explain her story. Father told us that if anything happened to him, the company should be jointly owned by my brother and me. But even before he passed away, my brother had taken all the necessary documents and was preparing to take over. As soon as our father died, he changed the company's ownership to himself. By the time I and the other executives realized, it was too late. I was thrown out without even being able to take my cards or phone. What a terrible story. Not only did he take over the company, but he also kicked his own sister out with nothing. That must have been tough. When I said that, she smiled gently. Even in such a time, you are kind enough to worry about me. You're really a nice person, Brian. Right, I just lost my job too. I wasn't in a position to worry about someone else. Sorry. I brought you here thinking having a roof over our heads was enough, but now this. I'll find another job as soon as possible and then... I trailed off. I had no right to promise a future with her. I was just a temporary housemate. Your next job is already decided, Brian. What do you mean? Would you work at my company? She smiled playfully. Despite being older, her expressions changed so frequently, which I found charming. Actually, a lawyer looking for me came by recently. Before he passed away, the former president had created a new will without telling anyone. It stated that the company should go to Mia alone, excluding her brother from inheritance. So, Mia, you're the new president? Yes. I couldn't believe it. The termination notice you received was from my brother. Your actual job offer is separate, so please pick it up at the office tomorrow. Okay. Then, Mia sat properly and bowed deeply. Thank you for everything. You saved me and helped me return to my rightful place. I quickly sat facing her and bowed as well. No, it's I who was saved by you. Thanks to you, Mia, my poor life, which was just about getting through each day, has turned into something fun and happy. I felt like crying as I spoke. It meant we had to part ways. Our modest, happy life together would end. This is our last supper together. Mia said sadly. I'm poor and younger than you, but if possible I'd like to live with you forever. I would regret it if I didn't say this now. I gathered my courage and told Mia. Please come to the office tomorrow. I'll be waiting for you. Instead of answering, she gently took my hands in hers, squeezing them softly. After dutifully helping clean up after dinner, she left the shabby apartment. The next morning, after a sleepless night, I arrived at work to find the office in an uproar. Brian, why didn't you answer your phone last night? I called you multiple times. As I put my bag on my desk, my colleague angrily confronted me. You missed a lot. It turned out that the executive Mr. Thompson hired was indeed his girlfriend. They discovered he was using company funds to buy her a luxury apartment, car, and brand name goods. They're both awaiting disciplinary action. But a new president is already decided. Really? Yeah, and as soon as you arrived, I was told to send you to the executive room immediately. So go. I headed straight to the executive room. The termination notice you received yesterday was not meant for you. There was a mix-up with the contents of the envelope. I'm sorry for the confusion. You should go to the president's office to receive your actual appointment letter from the new president. I returned the mistaken termination notice and headed to the president's office. When I knocked, a familiar voice said, "Come in." "Excuse me," I said as I entered the room, and there was Mia. She looked different from the Mia I knew. Her long hair was styled up, and she was dressed in a sleek suit, discussing matters with her secretary. When she saw me, she dismissed the secretary from the room. Meeting like this feels a bit embarrassing. Once we were alone, she reverted to the Mia I knew. You look great in that suit. I'm not used to it, it feels strange, she said with a shy smile. Then she switched back to her professional demeanor and handed me an official letter. Brian, I appoint you as the new executive director of this company. What? Me, an executive director? I've heard about your work from the other executives, and from living with you, I know your character better than anyone. As we rebuild this company, I need your help. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. And if possible, I'd like you to be my partner in life as well. Both professionally and personally. Really? Last night I couldn't respond right away because I thought being older than you, we might not be a good match. But I feel the same way you do. Forgetting we were at the office, I embraced Mia. We then started living together, with the promise to marry once the company's operations stabilized. We lived in that shabby apartment. For a while, we continued our lives as if nothing had changed. The only difference was that our living arrangement had turned into a romantic cohabitation. The company prospered, and we got married sooner than planned. It was bittersweet to leave the old apartment, but shortly after getting married, we discovered Mia was pregnant. And we moved into a spacious condo suitable for our growing family. As a side note, after the scandal, her brother and his girlfriend were arrested for their crimes and spent some years in prison. Rumor has it they are now living as homeless people. It felt like a dramatic turn of events, like a story where lives had swapped. 25 years have passed since then, and our son is now the same age I was back then. He joined the company as my successor and works under me. Time has flown by. That day, my son brought his girlfriend home for the first time. They've grown up so fast. After our son and his girlfriend left, I invited Mia for a walk. How about starting our second life here? That sounds wonderful. The place where our old apartment once stood is now an empty lot. We decided to build a house here. This is the place filled with our memories. The days we spent in that shabby apartment are still vivid in our minds.